You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Okay, now we're starting.
I love gratitude.
Are we good to start?
Yes.
Should we pick up your phone as soon as I say now we're starting?
Well, Stevie's typing.
Okay.
She's messaging me and...
So we're not really ready.
Well, she's a priority.
Before we get started on this episode that has already started, I want to shout out the Theory 11, not the company's name is Theory 11. So on last week's episode, we talked about these playing cards. They're Batman. It's the Dark Knight edition of their playing cards. And Steph got me some for Christmas. Asher. Our son got us 2 decks, got me 2 decks. Let me try to slow down a little bit. And I opened up one like immediately and loved it. And then I opened up the second one last week on the episode.
Did you watch the episode? Did you see what happened?
One of the cards was damaged upon opening. The Ace of Hearts had a nicked corner, which drives my ADHD and obsessive compulsive brain insane. But shout out to Theory 11. We reached out, sent them an email, and they're sending us a new deck. So
that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It's a good company, and they make cool cards. So if you're into cards of any sort, whether it be for Magic or playing cards or just whatever, right? Solitaire by yourself, they have really, really good cards, high quality. So
I like their cards.
I want to talk about our ADHD right off the bat.
Okay.
Because we keep owning it more and more and more and more.
Like AC/DC?
And I don't mean
ADHD?
I don't mean like in the...
Thunderstruck.
I guess for me personally, I keep owning it more and more in my own head.
Yeah.
And I keep recognizing more and more and more of my like behaviors and my habits and my quirks / what are they called? Like when you stem, you're stemming.
Your tics, your stems,
all the physical manifestations of what's happening internally within my body. So like right now, I feel like I'm going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking really, really quickly. And I don't necessarily want to slow down right now.
Okay.
But what I want to talk about, because I want to hear from your perspective of what it's like for you. Do you find that there's times, I mean, obviously this question is yes, but the follow-up question is what I'm curious about. Do you...
You're giving me too many instructions. Okay, go.
Do you find at times that it is worse than others? Like there's times where the ADD is...
Yes.
Like...
Oh, this is the yes, you knew.
Uncontrollable.
Okay.
It's just on fire where it's like you are the
Oh,
physical...
me? You're talking about me?
No,
I'm
no,
not judging. You, okay, yeah.
Stay with me. Come on.
Well, you're elaborating on the question that you already knew the answer to. So I'm just confused. Yes.
Okay. So the follow-up question to the obvious answered question is,
yes.
What do you find affects and influences that for yourself?
For myself?
Yeah. Like, have you been able to see what makes it worse at times? Stress, you think? Mm-hmm. I mean, not you think. I mean, it sounds pretty accurate to me.
Stress, unprocessed emotions, when they start to surface, stress activation makes it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. That question.
What about you?
Thanks, Captain Obvious over there. What would be the female equivalent of captain? I mean, women can be captains too, so I don't need to come up with the female equivalent. But never mind. That part, scratch, edit. Just tell the editor to take that part out. I think it is too, right?
Yeah.
Stress. But it's really hard because... Like what it feels like is, unless I'm really drinking my liqueur.
Yeah. Yeah. Pass a whole
unless
coupon
I'm
over.
like
Not coupon.
really
What is that?
Coaster.
That's it.
Unless I'm really focused, which I'm not because I'm in this like ADD tunnel of chaos, right? Mm-hmm. Unless I'm really focused, I don't even really have aware that I'm in like this. What would you call it? Like a episode or a cycle or
episode?
Because there's times where it's just...
Pattern.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
Has it always been that way in our relationship? Like I have a theory.
Okay. What's your theory? 11. See what I did there?
Cards. Go to Theory 11. I think it's theory11.com.
And now we're over here.
I think that the more I have allowed myself to both feel the things that I'm feeling, right? So I'm connected emotionally to my body, physically to my body. The more I've gotten connected to my body and my emotions, and like just the more allowance that I've had to process and feel things, but then also to be myself, then the more it has come out. And I think that's because I was keeping everything so rapidly, like so tightly wrapped and under control that I was very like, do you know what I mean? I wouldn't allow it to like come out.
Yeah.
And then in exchange for that, the only thing that would come out would be this tension and this anger. But I didn't feel like, if I think back to the beginning of our relationship, when you met me, I don't feel like I was scatterbrained, like walking around in circles. Like today I was trying to accomplish one goal of washing this water bottle, and I started it. And in the meantime of washing this water bottle, I fix a leak at the toilet. I don't think I went outside and checked the mail, but I spent a lot of time working on the toilet, and then I came back to the water bottle, and then I had to talk to you about the toilet, and then we got distracted by
Don't forget about the leak under the sink.
And I mean,
You were
it was,
outside
it
for
was
a while.
30 minutes before I got the water bottle
Right.
cleaned. I don't think I used to do that. Maybe I did. I don't know. That's what I'm asking is, do you feel like it has manifested more as time has gone on and you've gotten to know me, or looking back?
Are you done elaborating?
Isn't that an ADD thing too? Or is that a
Yes.
neural thing?
Well,
Or is that I have trauma and I have to over-explain myself in order to feel safe?
yes.
All of these
Yes,
things
yes,
run
yes,
into
yes,
fucking
yes. That
bleed
is
into
actually
each
one of
other.
the things that I wanted to talk about, but we can't
Put it on
spiral
the
off
list
on
because
that.
we'll fucking forget it.
Oh, God, I'm
like the water
forgetting
bottle.
your question that we spent the first 15 minutes making sure that was asked correctly. But that's a huge thing. Over explaining yourself is 100% a trauma response. And you have this ADD thing, and it's all of this, but it stems, I guess my perspective, right? My experience is that stems from trauma. Okay, we'll come back to this. I can stay focused. I can do this. So your question,
Yeah.
yes
Do you think
to the
it's gotten
first
worse?
part, and no, well, baby. Okay. Yes, I think it is showing up more as you are more connected with yourself, and you have been able to allow yourself to be, and really like bringing awareness to yourself. But I don't think that's what's made it what's happening.
This is a nightmare.
Okay, fix your chair. I'll wait.
I cannot hold still.
Yeah, I know.
Try to keep
This is gold. We need new chairs. I didn't mean to yell at everyone. Why need new chairs?
Okay, if you have a chair company and you want to sponsor this podcast, send us some fucking chairs.
I did this at the beginning. Remember, like I have to have it. I just squished my hand.
Okay, go ahead.
You won't hear my answer.
I'm going to just do a squat this episode.
So what? I don't think it's gotten
It's so hot in here.
Look over here. I'm like a baby trying to get the photos. Hey,
Right.
look over here. Wait,
okay.
that's not the thing. I couldn't even make the sound.
You don't think it's gotten worse?
Okay. I think what it is you and me both, okay, I'm not just pointing at you, it's just something that I can recognize in both of us, no longer have a very high demand, high anxiety, like a multiple of things. Your attention has to be in a variety of ways, which actually feeds and caretakes that, like ADHD. Because the past, everything you had to face and deal with on a daily basis was very critical, and it was one thing after another. And in that thing, you had to be aware of your environment, of what was taking place, what everybody was doing. You had to be constantly reading every situation, the energy around it, what's going on next, what could possibly happen, thinking about like all of these other things. So your brain was so taxed in so many different ways that the ADHD, that had a channel. It had a channel to manifest. And when you were home and things...
Just if you're brand new to the podcast and you don't know our past, We came from law enforcement. So I used to be a cop and Steph was a 911 dispatcher. Go ahead.
Back on. I don't know if I can get my train of thought. I left my hands here hoping I could just jump back in. You would get home.
Yes.
And when things weren't like that chaos, which is also a trauma thing, the slowing down, that was manifesting, showing up as anger and irritation because you weren't having that like outlet, basically. And so getting out of that, and then the trauma healing that you've been doing and the self-awareness and everything slowing down allows you to like, oh, now we're seeing it. Now we're aware of our bodies and our thoughts and what's happening, and you're feeling what's happening, not reacting to everything. So you're like, man, this is getting worse. And it's not getting worse. It's just now you're seeing it in a new level, and you're making healthier choices and healthier. And it seems like, oh, this is scatterbrained. I used to be able to do all this stuff, which you still deem. Like, again, as do I. I'm relating. I'm not just pointing. I'm like relating with myself here too. Come back. It seemed highly functional because you deemed it highly functional because you had all of these things, and this was the priority, and this is what needed to be taken care of. And you could do all of this all at the same time and do it well.
Were we functional neurodivergents?
We weren't functional. We weren't functional. We just had a standard that was in our brain of what we deemed to be functional.
Yeah.
And we were achieving that, and everything else was falling apart. But we called that no, we weren't functional. We were just really good at being
dysfunctional. Just
completely scattered, like being a million places at once really fast, really high cortisol levels of like, like we knew how to function high in trauma and multiple things happening. So that's not functional. It's just, we were really in survival, high survival mode. And now we are in thrival mode.
So fascinating.
I think that's my opinion.
Thrival mode.
I like it.
I do too.
It's like beast mode, only healthy.
Only healthy.
Thrival mode.
What I've decided, what I've decided for today.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on my thoughts?
Yeah.
You just like asked a question and I gave you like, how does that
changing
resonate?
Subjects quite. Yeah. Right. It resonates immensely. I think you're right. I think it was.
Keep going.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah. How does that feel though? Like within you, not just.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I feel like I'm not waiting I don't want your response to be, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, of course I'm right, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm not like, I don't want feedback to hear that I'm right. I want your take on it. And like, how does that land? I'm trying to get a drink. Quit telling me.
Are you playing a game of hide and seek with your microphone?
I don't know.
Right now, because I am like at this really, like if we could give it, like I'm always trying to give things a scale of 1 to 10, right? To me, it's like how I quantify my existence.
Can I measure this?
Right? Can this be measurable?
Is this measurable? Is this?
And on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm asleep, no, like I'm unconscious. Like there's a difference because sometimes in sleep, I'm even like totally on this ADD chaotic journey, right?
Okay.
So if I'm unconscious, that's a 1. And a 10 is like straight up mania, like walking and talking and clicking and twitching and like totally, tweaking out is like a 10 on the ADHD scale for me. This is only my scale, people. It's not yours. You can adopt it if you'd like. A 2. But like right now I feel like I'm at like a 6. Like I'm just having a really hard time sitting still.
Yeah. A 6.
And so you elaborating as long as you were, and keep in mind, you probably talked for 2 minutes. And in my mind, I'm like, Oh my God, 20 minutes later, she finally got around to expressing that thought.
That's how I felt when you were like explaining the question and I was like, geez, dude, it's so hard to keep my focus here. You're gonna by the time you get to it, I'm gonna forget what you were asking because I'm over here on a new thought.
So what came up for me today in journaling is allowance.
Allowance.
And not like the $5 that I used to get for mowing the lawn.
Okay.
But allowance of just is. So today I have really chaotic energy that in my mind is super ADD.
Yeah.
And it is. Because what I used to do is this day would be caught up with criticism and judgment on myself, right? This internal dialogue of like, dude, you really got to slow down. Like, you can't even clean your water bottle. Like, this is getting really ridiculous. Like, seriously. And that would be the running dialogue on days like today. Just this internal criticism of everything that I was doing and how I was feeling and how I needed to like control my shit and slow down. And they'd be like, you know what you really need to do, Craig? You really need to get outside and meditate. Matter of fact, why don't you just get outside? You know, you need to go get your feet in the dirt and you need to go for a walk. This is going to help you slow down. And then that narrative like doesn't stop while I'm running around in circles doing all sorts of different random things. I'm taking that narrative away.
Okay.
Like I'm just not allowing that narrative to take place. And instead the narrative is like, oh, look at you today.
Look at you today being a cute little...
Look at you today, bud. Pretty interesting, huh?
Interesting.
So I'm just allowing.
Curious about it.
It's not even curiosity of like, I got to figure, because curiosity to me is like, I got to figure something out.
Oh, okay. So it's another job to be curious, not just like,
Sometimes there's things I want to figure out. And
on a scale of 1 to 10, how
much do I want to figure things out? This one's about a 4. But let me give you a context for what that scale actually is.
Okay.
No, I'm teasing. But yeah, just allowance.
Allowance.
Like I'm trying to allow myself to go through life in this process of non-judgment in regards to how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Or what, like, you know, I feel like you're shaking your head in like all sorts of judgment.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry that it's coming across that way. I'm resonating so strong and I'm feeling similar and I'm having things coming. I'm not using the word allowance. I'm using the word like comfort and like comforting myself and allowing it to, I guess I am using allowance. I didn't hear it. But like realizing like what I'm going to do today, like I'm having these things coming up. So I'm not in judgment. I'm really sorry that my energy came across that way, but I am totally resonating with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm resonating with you completely and celebrating you. I'm so glad that you are finding like allowance for yourself instead of judgment and what do I need to do to fix this? And yeah.
Right. That idea that there's something wrong that I have to fix.
Yeah. I know it came across as judgment. I was totally teasing you when I was like, where is that on the number scale or whatever, however said. I was teasing you and I shouldn't have done that right there. So it totally gave you, you're like, something's off.
No, you're fine. That wasn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I was just expressing how I was feeling in that moment. I didn't say, Stephanie, make me feel better.
I was being accountable for the energy that I was bringing and
Thank you.
Honoring where you were feeling. Okay, now I feel like you're judging me. Go away. I won't worry about you judging me. I'll just remove myself from you.
I feel like there's a lot of people that are like in our scope of age.
Welcome 40-year-olds.
How could I have said that in a more
This is a podcast
way?
for 40s. I usually speak, Craig. I don't know what the hell you meant.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I feel like a lot of people from our generation, that makes us sound super old. Like when you start talking about your generation, you're definitely 70. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to what we're talking about right now.
I think so too. And I think
like
you have to have an ADHD brain to be able to follow this conversation that we just had, to be able to jump like as much as we did. Absolutely.
But like later in life, uncovering and realizing how you have all of these things that have gone undiagnosed your
Right.
entire life. Because I think back to my childhood
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, this isn't something that just happened in my 40s or, you and I met.
No,
right?
it's not.
I've been running around in circles my whole life.
It's just gotten worse now, right? No. Your awareness has shifted.
What I can see, though, is if I look back with these lenses, right? So with this view, I feel like you aren't paying attention to anything that I'm saying.
I'm trying so hard to keep myself here. So my scribbling is how I can keep myself here.
Is that like your deck of cards?
Yeah, judger. Jeez,
know,
put them
right?
down before you.
Because as soon as
And
you
I'm
start
facing the
talking-
way that you were like, this is how I want to. So I'm like trying to align myself to face
You
the
don't
way.
have to face the
and
camera.
I'm trying to do the things that you want to do and hear
Yeah,
and
the
keep
things
my
that I
brain
want to do.
listening and not think about all the grief that I'm in right now and
As
how
soon
hard
as
of
we
my
push
day is
record-
and still be processed and be in here.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize. You're not doing anything
I
wrong.
didn't say anything. You made me feel better.
Thank you for...
Totally did that throwback in your face thing. That was such a shitty thing.
You really do have to have ADD to pay attention to
See?
this conversation, this episode.
Man, are we going to be able to release this one?
Okay. Talking to the mic.
I thought I was.
And I look back at my childhood
Yes.
with this filter, these lenses now that I have, right? This clarity that I have about my thoughts and like it's really interesting because can you remember, this is going to be a really hard thing to articulate, but it's kind of an important
Okay.
thing.
You have my attention.
I remember being little, and little being like, whatever, 5, 6, 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the kind of little when you would play outside, right? And I mean, I played outside for, when I was a teenager. So, but I'm talking about like just that little kid phase of your life when you played outside. Okay. I remember playing outside and I can remember like being in my head. And I don't mean like I remember my thoughts. And that doesn't mean that I can like articulate exactly what I was thinking at 5 years old when I was playing outside or something like that. But I can remember the energy of being like internally within my own head, thinking and imagining and creating and having like the thought process of this internal dialogue different than the external world that was taking place. So almost like I had awareness where I was literally like in my own little world and my own little thoughts, and like I could hear.
Using your imagination? Is that what you're trying to describe?
It's not using my imagination. So it's not like, because I very much remember like using my imagination as a little kid, right?
Creating an alternate reality.
No.
Then what? No. Okay.
No.
Okay, I'm trying.
So right now, as an adult, you have awareness of your internal dialogue.
Yes.
You have awareness of your thoughts going through your head.
Okay.
You have awareness that it is like this ongoing thing that is running in your head, right?
Okay.
And we're not going to talk about like how that narrative and that thought process isn't you, and you're the observer of your thoughts. We're not going down that rabbit hole. What I'm saying is just the awareness of that process. I feel like I had that as a little kid.
You knew it wasn't you?
It's not necessarily that I knew it wasn't me, but I knew that it was taking place like inside of me. Because I think that there comes a point, and I could be wrong, right? I don't know. This is just my experience, but at some point you have awareness of thoughts.
Okay.
And they're like things that go in your head, but you don't verbalize them externally.
Mm-hmm.
Or you think like
Are you explaining a thought?
At this point, I might be explaining a thought. Thank you for clarifying
the things
it.
you can think. I think the closest I'm trying to like wrap my head around.
Are you explaining a thought? I am, babe.
The closest I think that I can
On a scale of 1 to 10.
resonate to what you're saying, and maybe that'll redirect, because I'm having a hard time following. But the thing that so like I didn't have awareness that my thoughts weren't me. but I never felt alone in my thoughts.
Okay.
So is that something kind of like how you're like, I've never felt alone in my thoughts. I've understood like I'm thinking these things, but I didn't
And
like
there's somebody else there or something else
I've
there.
never felt alone with my thoughts. Yes.
I see what you're saying.
But
yeah.
I haven't been like aware that without the vocabulary that these thoughts are not mine. And is that what you're saying, that you had awareness that these thoughts are not mine?
No, I didn't have the awareness that
without
these
the
thoughts,
vocabulary?
No, that these thoughts aren't mine. But the awareness that it was like, I think what you just said, right? I'm not alone in my thoughts.
Okay.
So you have the awareness of like something is happening.
Okay.
But it's more, I think you hit on it. It's that something was taking place where I was thinking these things and processing information, but that it was some sort of actual process, like something was happening. Like maybe this is too hard to explain.
It's definitely,
I just have to sit with it for a while.
It's definitely difficult. Like, and I don't like, I'm forming, because you know how brains work is that when I'm understanding what you're saying, I'm gathering from the information that I have, my experience that I have, so I can understand like that, forming that. There's new connections that come through, brand new information, which create new synapses. However, like there's still some sort of relating that it's doing. That's what our brains are always doing, is just relating. That's the way that all our clickety-click connections work.
Clackety-clack.
Clickety-click, clackety-clack. Don't talk back. Okay, focus. Go back. So that's the association that I'm having. Where was I going with this? It's a new awareness in a sense of like bringing it forward to look at. So like you had awareness of it, but there's a difference when you have awareness of something and when you're like, oh, and then you pull it, your awareness in front of you and you start looking at it like, okay, this is like my focus is now here on this awareness, and I'm realizing all of the different things that this could mean and this was and how it actually played out. So you can like examine this awareness that you had into like full focus awareness. And that's new right now. So is this something that's a new like full focus awareness for you, or is this something you've been pondering and working with? I lost you. I find it hard to articulate myself when it's a brand new, like, boom, new focus awareness.
Right.
When it's something that I'm like, oh, now I'm thinking about that differently. It's really hard for me to articulate because I haven't had it here.
This is a brand new thing I'm trying to articulate.
And if you're just listening, not watching, go to YouTube because it made sense with my hand gestures.
Yes. That really brought everything home.
That really did.
I fully understand.
Just the verbal wasn't, you have to like see like what I was doing.
The choreography.
I was painting a picture with my hands.
Yes, the interpretive dance of this experience.
It's the only way I can talk. I got teased about that since I was a kid. I was told like if they tied my hands behind my back, I wouldn't be able to speak.
I saw this cutest reel where it was this little girl, like toddler, 2 years old, and like the tag, or not the tag, but the thing in the reel was like, tie an Italian's hands behind their back and they can't even talk, right? And it's this little girl and she's speaking Italian and she's like got her hands up and she's doing the whole
cute.
It was so cute. It was so cute.
Freaking kids, they're so cute.
Where are we going with this? I think what I was trying to articulate and get to is I think there's a part of me that can remember this energy, like the energetic feeling of this ADD scatteredness that I'm feeling today.
Yeah.
I feel like I can remember what that felt like as a kid. And then I think I remember, I don't think, and then I feel like I turned it off as an adult.
The awareness?
Not the awareness.
You think you turned off your ADD?
No, it's like we were talking about earlier where I hid it.
You didn't really hide it. Yeah, you did. You did such a good job. Such a good job. You thought you hid your ADHD. Yeah, you did. You did do a really good job at focusing in and drawing attention to your strengths and keeping the other stuff. Like you were like, no, look at this only, look at this only, look at this only. You did a good job. Yeah, you did. You did such a good job. Myself. No, you did hide it. You did such a good job. You did such a good job at really showing all your strengths. You really did. You are very strong at presenting your strengths.
So with the lens that you have now, can you go back to the beginning of our relationship and see all the things that I was doing?
Nothing wrong. Perfect.
Come on.
Correct.
It's an honest question. And I'm not like looking like I'm very honest here. You're not going to say something that's going to upset me. I'm not like super triggered and then I'm going to hold it against you. It's a safe question to answer.
Am I elaborating or am I just simply yes or knowing? I'm just going to yes.
No, let's
I'm not going to elaborate. I'm going to say yes. I can see it now. And period at the end of that sentence.
So yeah.
Yes. Period.
Okay. Well, I guess I can't hide it. That's good. I'm glad that I'm aware of it now.
Yeah. You get to be you and all of the wonders that make you you.
Right.
You don't have to hide you.
Right.
You're kind of wonderful.
Hide from myself.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit slowed down now.
Okay.
You wanted to talk about, you brought up something.
Did I?
How we will over-explain ourselves.
You brought that up.
Well, you said that was something that you wanted to talk about on the podcast.
But we'll get to that. The feeling like I want to touch on something because it's like really hitting strong for me. The not knowing you're not alone in your thoughts. Like always having that, knowing you're not alone in your thoughts. The mic is literally, I'm almost eating it. Like this is your like, what'd you have for breakfast? A microphone.
Keep going.
I ate a microphone.
That was cute.
In my face. Where do you want it?
You're doing great.
Is it a visual issue or a sound issue? Because I also sound great.
And it's just a tick of mine.
I sound great. The microphone is perfect. I'm going to be in my...
When you get going, you come out above the microphone.
Oh, do I? It's because it's in my way. I'm trying to talk and I'm like, what is this thing? I got to get away from it. Why? It's in my face. Yeah. I don't like things in my face when I get going.
You're so good though, because you're a professional podcaster.
I'm trying so hard.
Be up on the mic.
I'm going to be like a cat and start batting it. Just like... Can you say that? What were we? Oh God, I can't podcast today. Okay. Are you picturing now?
No.
Are you checking emails?
I was going to record you.
I knew that. That's why I said, are you picturing?
I'm creating content.
We are actively creating content. Is it like picture in picture?
No.
That was funny.
It was funny. I'm feeling bad. Like my, craziness has now taken over this episode and worn off on you, and like I really want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
I'm very interested in what you want to talk about.
How we talked about the focus
and the awareness of your thoughts and not being alone.
So now it's like really here, and like I've had awareness of that, but it's always made me feel crazy, so it's not something that I've said out loud. And now I'm like, you too? Like maybe I'm not crazy. Like I've always like me not feeling alone in my thoughts. Like even feeling like I had privacy of my thoughts, like just not feeling alone in my thoughts. But that was never a comfort for me. It felt uncomfortable. Like I didn't feel safe. I felt like even in my thoughts, I'm not safe. So that, obviously that's a big root issue and not feeling safe at home and all of that stuff. But I'm curious how that felt for you. Did you, like, were you comforted that there was a process? And that's so cool. Like, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, to me, it was very comfortable. It was almost
comfortable or comforted. That's two different, like.
To me, it was like my thoughts, safest place. Could do anything there. Could think anything. Could have I could imagine, create, and also just have like all the freedom to. Like, this is kind of sad because I can see how that would have manifested from the trauma in my childhood and the upbringing and everything like that. But like to be able to rage inside of my own thoughts and to not feel alone there, to like have, so to have the, I think what we're talking about to kind of contextualize it is the ego. So that thing that exists inside of your head that isn't you because you're the observer of the thing, right? Like, I think I had awareness of that, the sensation that we're talking about of not feeling like you're alone in your thoughts. To me, that was comfort. That wasn't a uncomfortable thing. I didn't feel like weird or strange, or I never really thought much of it. I think I just had awareness of that dynamic. And then it was just like a place to go is inside my own head, where I could think whatever I wanted to think, and I could express whatever I wanted to express, and I could imagine whatever I wanted to imagine. And I still do that. Like, I still escape to my thoughts. So I don't verbalize a lot. So I don't share a lot. I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. And I also spent a lot of time alone even when I was with people. And so a lot of, I think, my like original soothing, my original self-soothing was that escape into my thoughts and into my head, and the disassociation and disconnection from my physical body and my surroundings and what I was going through. I think that's a big part of too why like I'm so in love with, like, you know, movies and TV, because that was another place to escape into. That was another thing where I could, like, I'll sit down and watch a movie. Now I'm not thinking. Now I'm not in my head. It gives me reprieve from that energy, and it also gives me the opportunity to just escape into that experience. But yeah, it was really comforting for me. Doesn't sound like that for you, though.
No.
Sounds like your experience was a little bit different.
Experience a little bit different. But I'm like I'm also like really happy that you were able to find peace in yourself, right?
Yeah.
You went in your thoughts.
I mean, to some extent, right?
To some extent. Was there a lot of like chaos and trauma and all this stuff? But for some, at least from my perspective, like, you found, okay, I see the disconnect. I don't know. To me, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to have this conversation. It's like, this is a very profound thing that you've shared. And it's almost like, I don't need to like give my perspective or like what it was like, or like my thoughts aren't applicable here in your experience of you.
Yeah, but I'm curious as to what it was like for you. I mean, that's separate from my experience. You're not negating mine.
I know, but it's also like talking over, like, let me tell you about my experience.
Is that
okay.
an ADD thing or a neuro thing or a trauma thing?
Who knows?
Or just a Steph and me and you thing?
Who knows? So yeah, not safe in my thoughts. Even my thoughts I'm going to be punished for those. Even that, like, all of my, like, my disconnect was disconnect from body and thoughts, like a complete extremes to wipe out my thoughts and any sensation. I was always disconnected from my body and then go to extremes to wipe out my thoughts. So if I'm completely immersed in something else, then, like, even if it's chaos that I can now see, even if it's chaos that's going to create more thoughts and more pain, in that moment, I'm still not in my body and not in my thoughts. I'm someplace safe from that. Like, getting away from me was such a thing that I've always tried to do. I wanted to be out of my body, out of my head, away, away, away. I've always had this like feel of like needing to escape and feeling trapped. So like peace in my thoughts, define like peace, like I lost, like hope wasn't safe. Hope was cruel. Like hope was like, you don't do that because then you're not prepared. So even like having like these fantasy worlds weren't a thing. I had like preparation thoughts. Like I'm saying all this now, when I hear it, I'm like, damn, you know, I can hear it, but that doesn't change with the fact that that's what it was.
What are you hearing?
Like how like much of, like I'm not going to criticize myself for learning all of these things as a small child and being like, wow, I wasn't very connected. You know, that's not very connected. That's not coming from self energy. Yeah, no shit. I was a little kid, you know, so I'm like, wow, that's a lot of trauma. And of course that continued to manifest the way it did. Of course, you know, the choices that were made, and wow, look how strong that I was able to direct my choices in healthier directions each time. So I've got a whole list of like traumas and bad choices that you can look at it that way, or you can look at like, wow, I continue to do better my entire life. Even if it was like see right there, it's like you're not even allowed to really allow these little progresses because you were still doing it wrong. When you're always doing, like, you're a human, you're making mistakes. So when I'm saying all these things, I'm like, oh, I can see how unhealthy and traumatic that is. And I can also see how like, that's I don't know. Maybe this is still stuff I got to hash out on my own. This is new stuff for me. So I'm not ready to fully express it here, but, yeah, I don't think I need to elaborate anymore. I think I said it. You know, the disconnect was so strong. Like I was always disconnecting from body and from mind. And I would use extremes, including extremes to my body, just extremes to keep me out of present, keep me out of body, keep me out of thoughts, keep me out, just put me someplace else. And I loved books. I watched a lot of movies, but like you had that thing with movies, I had that thing with books.
Yeah.
I loved reading, not textbooks. I'd read the same paragraph over and over again, never get it. But books that were fiction and scary, like Stephen King, I see it now, I love Stephen King books, not only because my mom loves Stephen King books. And so, you know, there's that pattern there that you're going to try and like mimic your parent on things or completely avoid your parent, depending on, you know, I had an avoidance and I had a mimicking. But the fear, it was so like gripping. And obviously Stephen King's an incredible writer because like, and my imagination is so good that it was like watching movies for me. Like, so in books, it was pictures. I was watching it and it was the extreme that took me to a different reality than where I was. So, and it's funny. It's funny. Or it's not funny. I don't know what to say now.
It's hilarious.
I'm like, it's funny. That's what you say. Like, oh, it's fine. It's funny.
It's so funny that you were a child disassociating from your experience as a child. It's fucking comical.
Like Cujo was one of my favorite movies.
Uh-huh.
That when I was a kid. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, it's a really feel-good movie.
Right.
I could see why, you know. I have a question for you.
Oh my God, I just figured out what Cujo was.
What's Cujo?
I just fucking figured it out. I'm going to share it. I just figured it out. It was a very scary situation. It was an aggressor that was trying to kill them and attack. And it was just the kid and his mom, even though it was a boy, it was just the kid and the mom. And the mom had made like these choices and got him into the situation. But the mom stayed strong and loved and rescued the kid and got the kid out of there. Like I was finding the like, mom, rescue me. Mm-hmm. Let's get out of like rescue. Okay, I can't fill into that completely because but that is a therapy session in my future.
Right.
Yeah.
If we had a Patreon, that would be what the next part would be. Was Steph going into that during the Patreon?
I don't know about that.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
And this might be too, like, if this is just too hard to kind of, like.
I'm about anything that's going to get me out of this, like, awareness. Like, I can't process this right here.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, as a kid, you disassociated from everything, both physically and even in your head, right? Even your thoughts and the mental aspect of life and, like, the complete disconnect.
Yeah.
Like, total disconnect. Mm-hmm. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily completely disconnect. I would be up in my thoughts, which was kind of like my safe place. Do you have any awareness of where you would go when you were totally disconnected? Like, is there any part of you that can kind of pull from or imagine or even an emotional feeling of where you would be in those complete disassociated moments.
No. That might be something that comes, like I said, like extremes from all the extremes that I would do. And I don't have a lot of memories.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have memories. I definitely have memories. It's not like, oh, I can't remember, but I don't have a lot of memory. Like I have little fragments.
I wonder
pieces.
if there is a place.
There's got to be, right? I have no idea what it is.
Because if we think about this from like the really esoteric, spiritual, different dimensions and realms and things like that, like when we completely disassociate from our body in order to survive something traumatic, we're leaving and our soul is going somewhere else.
Do you know where it is?
I don't know if I've ever, like in trauma, I don't know if maybe I have.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the times that I've completely disassociated from my body. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is. I don't know if I can answer this question. I don't know if I have awareness of what that place felt like, or because it's weird to think that it would have a feeling, but there's a part of me that says it has, because I think we know what it feels like when we're there, because we can reference that we did go there. So there's got to be something about it that sticks with us to say, oh yeah, I was disassociated. And then you can imagine, like in my head when I think about this, I can imagine what that thing feels like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which then tells me that maybe I'm having a memory of actually what it was and what it did feel like. Because it's not like the soul, right? The soul that leaves the body during disassociation. And we're talking like, I mean, just for context of people listening, we're not talking about like an out-of-body dream or like this is, I mean, it's not a near-death experience that we're talking about. This is
Although it could be.
Right? It very well could be. But this is what happens to the body when it is in such an activated fight or flight response. This is like the frozen, when you're frozen and whatever is going on physically to your body, around your body, in the space of your body, in your environment, you have zero recollection of.
Or like clouds, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like you can like
a mist and a fog that you can't even
really retell, even though you just you experienced it. And a lot of times people get invalidated for that. Like, oh, you can't remember? Yeah, because it was fucking hell.
Yeah. So like in my mind, the consciousness and the soul leaves the body in that moment, because it's like, whew, maybe it knows that it has to leave in order for the body to get through it.
It's like I just wrote down someone else was driving.
Because think about it this way, right? Like the drunk driver that survives the accident with no injuries is so relaxed in their body that they're flipping and flopping around in the car as it's rolling over and over again, as opposed to the person that is aware and bracing and trying to, tension and squeezing and trying to survive the experience, ends up with all the broken bones and the injuries. And the drunk that was just, whatever, has no injuries. So maybe the soul knows that in order for the physical body to get through what it's about to go through or what it's going through, I have to leave so that it can relax, so that it doesn't hold on to the tension and the fear of what's happening, because otherwise it will break.
Yeah.
So like the body knows, right? The subconscious knows, the soul knows, I need to pull consciousness in this moment in order to survive. And that I think has to be a survival instinct. Well, obviously it is, right? But I'm always going back to this idea of like, when we're hunters and when we're gatherers and suddenly we're attacked by the saber-toothed tiger or the big grizzly bear or something physically terrible is happening to our physical body, evolution is eventually going to teach us how to survive those moments.
Right.
And I can imagine that that's probably like this evolutionary aspect of our development where the consciousness knows, oh, let's go. Leave the body so that the body can relax and just go with the flow of whatever's taking place, hence survive it. And then we'll come back in afterwards and kind of clean up the aftermath. That makes sense to me as far as
that's totally like, right. That's like the thing. Like we know that our body does that.
Happens.
That's literally the design of it, so that we survive. No, I'm just like that clicks. The question you were asking is like, where do we go?
We have to go somewhere.
Yeah. It's like, where do we go?
Right.
Shoot.
We have to go somewhere.
And that's like a really good question, because there's things that are zero memory, right? There's things that there's a sense of something, but you don't know what there's stuff that you don't have any sense for. And then a memory might come later in life and you're like, oh, like so many times it's like, oh, wish that one would have stayed hidden. Like, don't need to look at that, even though you do, which is why it's there, and fuck and all that. But, like another aspect of it is how slow things get. Like how incredibly slow, and how like there's so much of it that's like, I know what to do in these circumstances. And so you think you have control, and that's just another slowing down to survive something that you don't have control over.
Right.
And we get so good at disassociating. We get so good at going limp. Like we even teach that. If you're in an accident, what are you supposed to do? Go limp. Like we get so good at even teaching like, oh, something's going to happen. Just go limp, go limp, go limp. That we stop having, we stop feeling like we have an active say in our environment, that there's other choices. And I'm not saying that, I'll just keep going. Once we have awareness of our freeze, once we have awareness of our complete disassociation, which keeps the patterns in the cycles that they're going, once we start to bring awareness to that, we can start to make small, different choices that can change our environments. Now, that's not for everybody, right? It's not like kids aren't really getting a say in their life. There's still choices they can make, but like how much control, how much like thought processing, when you're a kid, you're a kid, right? So it's not, and then what you learned as a kid comes through as an adult, where you're in an adult body and you still have this kid processing because you just stopped progressing. You stopped aging. So trying to figure that out. So just that little bit of awareness to start to shift the way that you're present in situations, that shifts the way that you proceed and act in situations, that can start to trickle down and start changing your environment. Like it's so hard. Like it's so incredibly hard being in an incredibly volatile situation that you feel like there is no hope. And for a while there is no hope until these little like shifts. And then sometimes like horrible things happens. Like you start to make the shifts and the other person snaps. Like there's so many what ifs and so many things, but that's not a reason to not keep like bringing yourself back into your body, to finding that, to not always having to leave your body. And that's so much work. That's like a goal. That's not something that like, oh, this is really you and you just need to make the shift now and go back into your body. And like, this is a process of years, maybe. That was my process. My process was a process of years, and I'm still learning new things, and I'm still trying to uncreate those patterns and way of responding that I have done my entire life. That while it's not appropriate or applicable anymore, I still show up like that because that's how I knew. So like that reprogramming of getting into your body and the awareness and choosing how you're going to show up differently and how you're going to actually see what is actually happening in front of you instead of seeing something else. Yeah. Something else entirely. So where do you go? I don't know.
And maybe we're not supposed to.
Maybe we're not supposed to. Like it did its job.
Right.
And now where are we going to be?
I picture like this.
Come into your body.
I picture like this plane of existence where it's just a bunch of consciousnesses hanging out, like taking shots and having a good time while their bodies are down there getting all fucked up. And they're like watching them like, oh my God, this one's going to hurt. And then they're like, "Hey, see you later, Charlie." And then you drop back down into the body or something. But
you hear a crowd of them going like, "Oh, that one." You're going to be up here a while. Another round.
I had, this kind of goes into what...
It's funny that we used even disassociation in that place.
Right. The, in this process of us healing the inner child and going back and having like compassion for this part of us that had to develop these coping mechanisms, right? So it's like going back and recognizing, hey, that wasn't a safe environment. You did the best that you could. You know,
Yes.
I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm here for you now. You know, you're safe now. There's no longer a need to have those coping mechanisms and those survival things. Like we get to be safe here. It's safe for you to feel. It's safe for you to express. It's all of these things that we're trying to do as we reparent this little inner child inside of us.
Forgiving yourself for actions you took while you were trying to survive.
Exactly.
All of that. Like,
and like that version of us, that inner child of us really resonating and, you know, like appreciating all of that love and that attention and kind of starting to heal. And then on Glennon's podcast this week, I don't remember exactly the context of it, but what it triggered in my mind and what they were talking about, the concept and idea too, right? Where we have that inner child that we're loving better because they had to learn how to survive. There's also like a version, so it's like the IFS parts work, where there's also a part that is pissed off now because they're like, hey, motherfucker, I did all of this work and figured out all of this stuff. By the way, I was 4, and now you're telling me that that wasn't right? And now you're like, oh, turns out you were just disassociating. We're supposed to feel our feelings. Be like, wait a minute. Like nobody was there to help me through that process. Yeah. I did the best that I could, and now you're telling me that I did something wrong or that I wasn't right, or now you're trying to tell me that we're supposed to be doing something different. Right. Like, bitch, I've been keeping us alive for 40 years.
That's what I'm saying. Forgive yourself. Love yourself for what you did while you were surviving, what you did while you're trying to survive. Like that, you're here because of that.
Right. And I don't think I've taken into consideration giving that part of me space. I've given my, like, the inner child part of me that just wants the love, like the part that had to disassociate. I'm like, come here, you don't have to I love you. Let me love you. But then there's the part that like developed the skill set to disassociate that is also there and has to be acknowledged and loved. And like, you did a really good job. Like, I'm really proud of you for figuring all of that out. Like, that's so awesome that you figured out how to, it's like, good job. You figured out how to tie your shoes when nobody taught you how to tie your shoes, right? Good job. You figured out how to survive a chaotic, incredibly abusive, destructive, horrible existence. And you did it. Like, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it anymore. And when you still do it, it's okay.
Right.
Right. Because you and I both still disassociate, and we both have coping mechanisms and all of those things. But let's wrap up. We'll
I do invite you with that new awareness to like take a note real fast of it, because that is really good work happens in that space. So I invite you just to like pause for a second and write that down. Did you do that?
Well, I wrote down the reminder, so I know what that is. Okay.
Because that's like yes. And for you too, if that like resonated with you and you're like, ooh, and that hit, write it down. Do something like pause the podcast and do a verbal note on your phone if you have to. Put it down somewhere, because as much as like this hits right now, if you notice when things hit and you're like, ooh, I'll remember that, your other protectors, managers, parts come in and they're like, whoa, psh, and then you forget and it's gone until it comes up again. You're like, oh, that was the thing. How did I forget?
I don't remember that.
Don't remember. We don't actually want to do that. So write that down. That's, yeah.
So this segment at the end of every episode is answering listener questions. And that's not just people that listen to the podcast. Like if you follow us on social, you can send us messages. You can email us at any time. It's info@energyisLove.love. And we're just answering questions.
Just know us personally and you don't really watch stuff and you're like, hey.
Yeah, if you want to call us or text us and you have our numbers, you can do that too.
What's this? What do I do here?
And there are any questions, like no question is off limits, but there will be definitely questions that we don't answer because whatever, right?
Also, it doesn't mean we have the right answer. This isn't like, this is what you do. We're just giving you our take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this question we get all the time, and it's come up quite frequently. And recently it has as well, right? Where people want to know what to do in a relationship when their significant other or their partner isn't working on themselves and they aren't like doing any inner work or self work or trying to address any of their issues. And so you've got one person in the relationship that's like actively working on themselves and trying to improve and taking accountability,
looking in, expanding themselves.
Yes. And then you've got another person in the relationship that appears to be doing none of that.
Or even maybe hindering. Like, I like things the way they are. I don't want them to change. Right. I don't want you to change because that's scareful. Scareful?
That is a scareful thing.
That's a scareful thing.
That's when you are scared and fearful. Scareful.
So what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Your throat closes off for all.
And the thing that we always like to bring up first and foremost is, especially in relationships, like in a committed relationship or even a non-committed relationship, in partnerships, what is happening in that relationship and what the other person is causing you to feel is an invitation for you to then look internally with what that is actually bringing up inside of you. So if we'll just use us for an example, and this is, I mean, we went through this for sure, right? We've both gone through this over the course of our relationship, but just for the sake of this question, if I feel like I am like reading a lot of self-help books and I'm listening to all of these podcasts and I'm starting to like eat differently and I'm trying to go for walks and I'm trying to exercise and I'm trying to do all of these things to improve my mental and emotional and like physical health. And then Stephanie isn't.
Watching soap operas all day and what else?
I think that's it. Just watching soap.
I was going to be like eating, because it's the whole thing. But, you know, since we went into this, I went into the stereotypical, like what soaps and bonbons used to be the thing that people would say. Like whatever
Our
your judgment
will know
is.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. It just seems like I'm not doing anything. I'm
exactly.
Like, and resisting or maybe secretly sabotaging your efforts.
Yeah, like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? No, I don't want to go for a walk. Hey, do you want to read this book? No, I don't want to read that book. Anyways, you get the picture.
Yeah.
But
So
what I have to do first and foremost is when I have awareness of that, the reaction oftentimes is to just direct everything at that partner. So I'm trying to say, hey, Stephanie, why don't you do something? Hey, Stephanie, why don't you go for a walk with me? Hey,
so what
Stephanie,
are you feeling when I'm not doing that?
So what I'm saying is that's oftentimes what people do first is they project everything outwards at that partner. So if you're doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal. Take a pause and just reflect on what's coming up inside of you.
Exactly. So what are your projections? What are you perceiving me? Like trying to define that for a minute. Like if I'm not doing this, like just throw some examples out there. Like I would say, like I'm not supporting you. I'm not making an effort. We'll just use those two for that. Okay. I'm not showing up. So then you can look at that. Okay. Not being supported, not making efforts and not showing up. So then you can look at yourself and be like, okay, where did I feel this? Where have I felt this for the first time? Where have I felt unsupported? Where have I felt like efforts weren't made? Where have I felt like people didn't show up for me? And then where am I not supporting myself or others? Where am I not making an effort? Where could I be making? Where am I not showing up? So those things that I'm showing you are now all of these points. You can go into some core work and you can go into like, it's showing you where areas where you yourself can start making improvements. I'm giving you the opportunity to see what you're not doing, but you can't see in yourself. You're projecting it out.
Yes. So that's the first thing that we always recommend is rather than project everything outwards at that partner, and then you get caught into those loops and into those patterns where you're just blaming each other and they're defensive and you're the person that's trying to help them. Like, come on, we told you.
Like, why are you trying to change me? Why are you trying to control me?
Rather than getting caught into that dynamic, into that loop, just look at what it's causing you to feel first and foremost. And then you have to have a real conversation with your partner. You have to be able to communicate, hey, not you aren't doing anything, but I feel like I'm trying to think of how to articulate this because it's so hard to articulate like I statements when they are triggered by the other person's behavior.
Yes. It's so hard to use those I statements, but they're so important.
So the idea is I'm not judging you for what you are doing or aren't doing. I'm simply expressing to you what it causes me to feel.
Like when it appears that you are not showing up, I feel afraid that
like you're not
this
going
relationship doesn't matter
Right.
to you, that you don't matter.
That you don't, I mean, truthfully, it boils down to, I think oftentimes that you don't actually feel loved by your partner because they aren't showing up in the relationship and they aren't like caring about what you're doing. And I mean, it plays out in all sorts of different ways that we could elaborate on forever and ever and ever and ever.
I have another one that I'm going to elaborate on.
Go ahead.
With that. No, keep going. I'm just saying, like, we could elaborate forever and ever. I'm like, we're going to. This is the podcast of people who over-explain.
Go ahead.
You want me to jump in and take over?
Well, not take over, but what else are you going to elaborate on?
I will write it down. Keep going.
Well, I don't remember. Basically, that's your opportunity to have a real conversation with them about what is happening for you and what your experience is rather than what they aren't doing. Mm-hmm. And those type of conversations take time and space. You have to create the environment for them. They're not the type of conversations that you have after like a busy day or something like that. It's like we wake up in the morning or you just have to find time where you can communicate without distraction and you can know that that person is actually tapped in and listening to you. So it takes practice to be like, hey, this is an important thing that I want to talk to you about. When would be a good time for us to talk? Cool. We set up a time to talk. I'm feeling this X, Y, and Z. And that it doesn't have to be anything else besides that. It doesn't be, I'm feeling this. What are you going to do to change? I'm feeling this. Now you have to fix whatever it is that you aren't doing. I'm feeling this. How are you going to make me feel better? It doesn't have to be any of that. It just can simply be, I'm feeling this. And then the work goes back to you. The work goes back to you recognizing how do they respond in that moment and how does that make you feel? What are their actions then mirroring for you to look at and go internally? Because, and I think you and I are a good example of this, Steph, where it's like oftentimes in relationships, I think it feels like a competition where you're competing with your partner for like whatever, right? Superiority, control, all the different really unhealthy things that we get taught.
Worth, showing
society,
that you're worthy
right?
by what you accomplish.
All sorts of different
for
things.
the love.
And even like just from the really inner child little perspective of like, I'm going to win this race or whatever, right? So we get this competition mentality and we go back and forth. And when it comes into the space of like healing and self-improvement, it plays out like, hey, I'm showing up for like myself and I'm trying to show up for our relationship and you aren't doing your work. You aren't doing anything. So then they get defensive and then they get shut down and it just spirals so quickly. So you have to be very conscious of not allowing that thought process and even just having awareness if that's taking place and shifting it up to where you're loving and supporting that person no matter what they're choosing to do. And this might go on for years. And at some point you may have to ask yourself some harder questions, but just get into the practice of their best or what they deem to be self-help or work, or even just like them changing, they might be doing the absolute best that they can. And our best always changes.
Our best always changes. And to spin off on all of that is something like this is when you look at the core of this, what is coming up is you are, in a sense, judging them for not showing up the way that you have decided what showing up looks like. So when you start to really dive in, everybody has a different journey on working on themselves, and everybody has a different timeline of when they're able to fully show up in that space. And so where you are now ready to make these efforts and make these changes does not mean that that's where your partner is now responsible for being for themselves or for you, for the relationship. You got to this point, and how they are showing up is only a judgment, is only a mirror. And then feeling judged, because when you start doing all those things, so maybe they're throwing judgments at you because it's rocking what is comfortable. It's rocking, like, change is scary. Change, like we've talked about that before. We should probably go into that again. Change doesn't always mean bad, but change triggers the fear. It triggers the fight or flight, especially when things have been like a chaotic and unstable environment in the past. So when they feel change, it's like, oh, like now I'm afraid. Now I'm afraid. So in order to curb that, like I'm judging you on that and making your choices wrong because I want you to say. So that's where that sabotage comes in. It's rarely a conscious choice to sabotage. It's more often a subconscious behavior that is coming out from fear and from past traumas. So realizing at first, like them not doing the work is a judgment on them. So when you get ready for this real conversation that you're going to have, be invested in not only like speaking clearly your wants and needs for yourself and how you would like to move the relationship with your partner, but be equally, if not more, invested in hearing their experience and hearing what's going on, hearing the things that they are processing and working on. Just because you can't see it in the way that you are displaying it doesn't mean that they are not in it and actively working on themselves. Maybe at that moment, working on themselves is keeping their head above water.
Yeah.
Just keeping their head above water, trying to be as present as they can, keeping a job, working with kids, like all of these different ways. I don't need to get into all the explanations. So I make sure that everybody feels heard and seen, like just your experience is that. So what they are going through, even when you are partners, you don't know. You don't know unless you listen when they tell you. They have to show up and express, and you have to listen without judgment on what they should be doing or what you think they're going to say or your opinion of how difficult a situation may or may not be for them. So be ready to hear that and listen. When you create a safe environment for people to show up in, it's a lot easier for them to show up. And when you get out of your head of what it looks like when somebody shows up, just because like we may resonate with you or this person may resonate and that's how it looks like, doesn't mean that's what it is for everybody. Yeah. Like we have each changed the way that we work on ourselves and what resonates for us over and over and over and over again. As it's grown, we've went in different directions over and over again, because as you're growing and you're healing, it changes, it shifts. And for a while it was just keeping our heads above water. So I invite you, when your partner's not doing the work, to be open to those conversations, really hear, and then keep going. Keep working on yourself. You don't need them to work on themselves the way you see it for you to keep going. Keep healing, keep improving. That, not only do you deserve that, are you worth that? Is that what it's about? But things change. The vibration shifts. And maybe it doesn't. Like you said, maybe harder conversations come. Maybe like people can outgrow people. And when people aren't held to the judgment and accountability of the partner standard, we're allowed to grow at different rates. And sometimes you're up here being like, what are they doing? And then they catapult. You got some stuff. So it's not that brings the competition thing up. It's not a competition on where you're at, who's doing more work, who's achieving, who's getting left behind, because that's another thing. They might be really feeling left behind and that they can't keep up with you and they don't know where to start. And then you're judging them for it, which only reinforces that worthlessness of not being able to match. Like all of these things, it just keeps going. So it comes down to be willing to hear them and keep doing your own work. Keep doing your own work regardless of who is showing up the way you see it. Keep finding what resonates with you and being compassionate about how when you're shifting and changing the relationship, how that will affect your partner. Not that you need to stop, but their feelings are valid too. And so those conversations are, they're so crucial. And then learning how to have those conversations, that's trial and error. You're going to fuck it up over and over and over again. They are going to. You just got to keep trying as long as you want to.
I think that having compassion for what their experience is and what they're going through is the key. And when you go from compassion to criticism, then that's more about you and less about them. Anytime you're trying to criticize your partner, or you find your thought patterns and your internal thinking as well as your external actions and words from this place of judgment and criticism, that should be the key for you to pause and look at what is coming up inside of you and why, and what their actions are actually causing you to feel. That's where it becomes your work, not about what they're doing, but what about you can process. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
I have something that just came, so I do want to say.
Please.
Self-love and encouragement is never a weapon. So when you are doing this, using it as a weapon for where they are lacking is not helpful. That is not helpful. And it's like, that's not the intention. So watch, are you weaponizing your work?
Let us know what you think. And if you have any other ideas that you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. You can email us once again at energyislove. Nope, it's info@energyislove.
That's what I do. Every reel, I always say energyislove.love. I always forget the info at.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. And you can also email us anytime you have questions.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Go ahead.
And then for the AC/DC episode, not AFib, Jesus. What am I trying to say?
ADD.
Or, the Ds, the HDs. Jesus.
All the Ds.
Oh, my hell. If you also just listen to me and go to energyislove.love, that's the website. You're going to figure out how to still send us a message there. So it's not like it's the wrong people. It's just directly to email is info@energyislove.love. We got to go.
We got to go.
I don't know.